All right, so we're playing a 1400. And let's go e4. We've been playing the Danish Gambit almost exclusively. And if it ain't broke... wait, why am I blanking on the expression? If it ain't broke, don't fix it. All right, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. So let's see what happens. c3. D takes c3. Thank you, Malice RL, with a prime. And I'll talk more about this tonight, guys. I'll formulate my thoughts. I'll make a couple more. I'll address things in more detail tonight, but let's leave everything at the door right now. Okay, so bishop b2, c6. And that's... I think we actually faced this move. I think we actually faced this move once. And I think the motivation behind it is to prepare the move d5, but this square on d5 is well defended by 3 of our pieces. So we respond to this move in a very unremarkable way. We need to complete our development. We don't have enough stuff out to mount any kind of serious threats against the king. So knight f3 is the move. Bishop b4 check. And that's a good move, which begs the question, what do we do? Do we cover with knight c3? Do we cover with knight bd2? Or do we move the king? And in the Danish, you can sometimes actually move the king. That's not the dumbest idea in the world. Now, which move can we rule out? The move that we can rule out is knight to c3, which may appear to be the most natural developing move. But it covers up the bishop, and we want this damn bishop to attack g7. That's one of the things that is so appealing about the Danish, is all of these threats that we have. So that leaves us with king f1, realistically, and knight b to d2. And I'm pretty indifferent. I think both moves make sense, but let's play more. I want to castle. I don't want to move the king around in the center. Let's just go knight b to d2. That's probably wrong, actually. I have a feeling. I think I remember king f1 being the move here, theoretically, but it's fine. And again, to the point that I made yesterday, I'm not always playing theory moves. I don't know the theory. I have no clue what the theory is here. So I am trying to play the most natural moves, because it can only go so badly if you do that. Well, he can play d5, but g7 is hanging, so bishop takes g7 would win the rook, so I'm not sure d5 is justified. f6. Oh. Woo. Okay. Okay. Calm down, Daniel. Need I explain anything more? Yeah, this is not the greatest move. Of course, he's blunting the bishop, but look at the weaknesses that he's creating on his king side. And the first thing that I see here is this knight on g8, which is targeted by the bishop. It's a type 2 undefended piece. So there's a very natural move here. It doesn't win a piece, but it creates further difficulties for black in terms of getting his pieces out. And that's the move queen b3. I've talked about this idea before in the Danish. Stacking the bishop and the queen. I would have preferred for this battery to be flipped. Then we would have been threatening checkmate. But this is pretty much good enough. I think he has to, yeah, he has to take. And, okay, so this is interesting. I think a lot of people would grab instinctively with the knight. And we will take with the knight. We will take with the knight. But I just wanted to point out that king takes would not be stupid. Because the king in the center isn't great, but he's got no pieces out. And there's something to be said for opening up the e-file, quickly getting a rook there, and then slamming down e5. But there's something that gives me the creeps about that move. One second, let me disconnect my headphones from my phone. I don't know. I'm going to take with the knight. Because, see, the thing is, we're not really in a hurry to put a rook on e1. He's not castling anytime soon. If he moves his knight out, right, look at 2 of our pieces stopping his king from castling. So I just don't see a way for him to castle quickly, and so I think this is justified in the sense that we will tuck our king away in the king side. And, you know, this leads me to the point that sometimes playing the most simple chess is the most reliable kind of chess. Okay, so knight h6. Let's castle. He can go d5. We'll take on d5. He can technically castle there, but we'll just take everything on c6. He'll play a Danish Gambit of his own. The difference being that he'll lose a bunch of his pieces. Queen e7. Okay. So what should we do now? What should we do now? Now, he's not threatening to castle. We should ask ourselves what his idea is. I think his idea is to bring the knight back to f7, and then he'll be ready to castle. So we don't have forever. A lot of you are saying rook f1, I like that move. But there's a very important question to ask yourself in these kinds of positions, and that is, do we need to play rook f1? When you're preparing a move, you should allocate at least a couple of seconds to figuring out whether you even need the preparatory move in the first place. Can you eliminate the middleman? And those of you with sharp tactical vision will see that you actually do not. You can play e5 straight away. F takes e5, you can take with the bishop. And if he takes that bishop, his queen will get skewered with rook f to e1. And that's a simple thing that everybody could do. You just ask yourself, do I need the middleman? Do I need the preparatory move? Sometimes the answer is yes, I do. Sometimes it's no, I don't. f5. But that leaves us with a beautiful pawn on e5. And we should note that that pawn cannot be captured, even if there was no bishop on b2. And that leaves us... oh, it's a pin. Sorry. It's not a skewer. Skewer is the other way around. Again, in Russian, it's the same word. I actually have noticed this. I get this confused all the time. And sometimes my students look at me like, what are you... weren't you supposed to be a GM? But to my knowledge, it's the same word in Russian, so I don't really sense the difference always. Yeah, bishop a3 is a great move. Now, you can think of this bishop on b2 as having done its job. It's a superfluous bishop. We don't need it anymore. Its role was to help prepare e5. Now that e5 is already played and this pawn doesn't need protection, this bishop can see greener pastures, particularly because the bishop on a3 covers the f8 square and makes it even harder for him to castle. You get misinformation all the time. Oh, it would be amazing to put the knight on d6. I don't really see a way to get there. c5 is a great move. This guy is good. Wait, I do see a way to get there. Let's get this knight onto this unbelievably juicy outpost. This is even better than a kebab. How do we do that? Now, we need to fly from Charlotte to Paris. So we need to go through London. You know, Munich is closed. The airport is closed. Now, the problem is there's a plane at our gate. There's a plane at our gate. Let's get that plane out of there. Yeah, bishop d5. Bishop d5. Now, why d5? Because we want the bishop to remain on this diagonal. Now we can go to c4. Yeah. The knight is not wearing a mask. He got thrown off the plane. So bishop d5 because there's no other good squares. I want the bishop to remain on this diagonal to make sure that he's not castled, okay? And also this centralizes the bishop. It's just visually good. Well, he can't take on e5. Nothing changed. We'll just take back and then we'll skewer his... God damn it. Pin his queen. What's wrong with me? Just misinformation all over the place. Calling pins skewers. This is a great example of how propaganda has seeped into the chess world, with grandmasters now basically controlled by large media corporations. Okay. Yeah, this is unenviable for black. And look at this. Look at these holes in his position. Yeah, I do, but his knight coming out, he should go knight d4 here and attack my queen. And then we shouldn't rush with a check. We should just move our queen. Let me just note this down. So, assuming he doesn't play knight d4. I think he will, but... Alright. Pin is sviazka. It's like, comes from the word for connection. Sviazka. I don't know, maybe the word skewer does exist in Russian, but I don't think so. Maybe somebody can tell me. I've always thought of it as just sviazka. Okay, well, let's eat. Wait, or let's not. Knight d6, maybe he can then take on e5. I think that's what he's trying to do. He's trying to unpin himself preemptively so that he can take on e5. But let's not stop calculating. If we go knight d6, right? And he plays queen takes e5. how can we support the knight in that position? Because we don't have to support the knight with a pawn. We have a piece that is ready to jump into the action. We don't need to play f4. We can play knight d6. But the reason why we can play knight d6 is after queen takes c5, we can play bishop takes c5. Our bishop jumps into the game, and the bishop operates in the capacity of the pawn, supporting the knight. Now, why is this even a good thing? Why don't we want a pawn to support the knight? Isn't that better? Well, yes, in principle, but remember, queen takes c5 works in our benefit because it opens up the position further, and the side that has more active pieces generally benefits from that. So we kind of want him to take the pawn anyway for the sake of opening up the position. Now, he's gone b6. He's very solid. And I see the possibility of taking the knight on c6, which doesn't seem to lead anywhere after d takes c6. But imagine if we had a rook on d1 x-raying his king. Then we would be able to step aside with the knight and win his queen. So which rook should we put on d1? Well, let's think about the other rook. If we put this rook on d1, that restricts the other rook to come to e1. Plausibly, he's going to go king c7 after rook f d1 to escape the pin. And if he does, we might want this other rook to come to c1 in order to once again repin or reskewer the king. So let's go rook f to d1. And if he takes on e5, we will take his knight, and then we will have a devastating discovery. I have to speed up a little bit here. I don't want to lose on time. Yeah, that's a good question. But this is not, the considerations here are quite simple. When you're deciding which rook to put on a square, you need to look at the other rook. What will the other rook be doing? Where do you want the other rook to be? And that sometimes requires a prediction. Like I made the prediction that he's going to go king c7, and then we would put the other rook on c1. Yeah, he does. They don't call me the pruffer for nothing. Okay. So let me think for a second. Yeah, let's go rook ac1. And we have once again pinned, or x-rayed is the appropriate term here, x-rayed the king. Now, this is where things get very tactical, okay? This gets tricky. We're going to step aside with the knight, and I'm making this move quickly because I don't want to lose on time. And this puts him in a very difficult situation. If he goes back to d8, that's why we put the rook on d1. We take his knight, that's a free knight, and that's winning. If he goes king b8, then the queen, and this is kind of elegant, all three of our major pieces have taken a turn on x-raying the king. If this pawn was gone from b6, we would have some form of devastating discovery. So what move comes to mind here? This guy is definitely very, very, not an easy opponent. I like bishop takes, yeah. Bishop takes c5. Blasting open the pathways to his king and threatening bishop d6 check. He has to take, and then it's still not easy for us to win. In fact, we might want to hold off on the discovered check until we get all of our pieces into the attack. Yeah, so this is not an easy game, not an easy opponent. But we're keeping our foot on the gas pedal, and at some point, if you stay calm, something will come up here. Yeah, so we're going to take with a rook here. We're just going to take, no rush. We're going to create another x-ray against his queen. And hopefully this is going to be the final straw that's going to lead him to collapsing bishop b7. That's a good move. Okay, let me think for a second. There's a line that I'm calculating, which potentially leads to a beautiful win. But I want to make sure I'm not screwing it up, because if I do, that's not going to be good. Okay, there is a really beautiful line here, I think. Let me make the moves again. I'm sorry, I hate to... Wait, actually... Oh my god, there's a defense there. Shush. Yeah, no, it doesn't work. Sorry, I just need to focus here. Trying to find a win in that position. There's an insane defense. Yeah, I think knight d6 is the move here. Or knight d4. These should all be winning. Yeah. Okay, knight d4 it is. Now, I'll show you guys everything I was thinking, but we're just going to play it safe. I really wish that would have worked. I think this is completely winning because just threatening a million things here, overwhelming him. The immediate threat is, by the way, bishop takes c6, opening up the attack on his queen and simultaneously threatening this checkmate. So don't worry, I'll walk you. No, that's a really good move, though, rook e8. Let's go h3 to stop the back rank threats. Yeah, he's definitely defending super well, but I don't see a defense for him here. I just feel like it's too many. There's just too many threats. Yeah, now h3 was important because he was threatening checkmate. Rook takes c1, rook takes c1, checkmate. Yeah. So again, queen is x-raying the king. The rook is x-raying the queen, which means we can combine the two. Yeah, he goes there. That doesn't work. We can just take anyway. Yeah. And this is the crusher, because if he takes, then we take there, and that's a complete disaster for black. So he's going to lose his queen here. He has to take back, and then he loses his queen. I don't see a defense here. Okay, he takes this way. We take his queen. And now on top of that, we have a very strong move in this position that ends the game. What move am I thinking of? What move am I thinking of here? We have actually a couple of wins here. Knight e6 is what I'm thinking of, but when I look at this position a little bit longer, I see an even better move. We can just play queen to g3. Yeah, or knight e6. It really doesn't matter. Let's go knight e6. He can't bring his king back because we checkmate him. He has to give up his rook, and he has two pieces for the queen, and his king is in huge trouble there. So it's completely winning. Queen takes c6. Or Artemiev lost the match against Persia. Okay, this was a very rich game, tactically rich game. And you can learn a lot from these kinds of games, which is why you want to play. Artemiev had the one-game lead. Oh my god, Demon, that's crazy. How do you... I don't understand. Check, check, and checkmate is very easy. Oh my god, that's insane. Rook b1. Goodbye, queen a3. Ladder mate. No, there's no such thing as dirty play in these matches. You guys, I won't... If you actually think that there's no such thing as really as dirty play, if you run the timer out, that's fair game completely, because you want to win the match. You got to do anything to win. That's the nature of bullet. And for Artemiev, it's just a big blunder. That, you know, I'm a big Artemiev fan, but that's just, he, you know, you've got to have that awareness. Although it's easy for me to say because you've got to have the timer open, but that can be hard to look at. Thank you, Lactose Fatigue. Okay. Yeah, Al-Hashmi not playing today. So small change of plans. Okay, guys. So the accuracy, I know you guys are curious. The accuracy was probably not good for me. I messed up. I probably did not play precisely at several points. Okay, it was not bad. It was 98.4 to 72.3. That's better than I expected. All right. Yeah, I was cheating. That's right. All right, so Danish Gambit, c6. Now, yeah. Sorry, I honestly didn't know. I'm not trying to do the humble brag thing where I'm like, I knew it was high. Okay. So knight f3, bishop b4 check. And we decided on knight bd2. I think this is fine. To those of you who thought black can play d5, the problem with this move, for example, e takes d5, c takes d5. Who can spot the most clinical move for white here? Who can spot the most clinical move for white in this position? Well, Russian parents too. Trust me. So a lot of you are thinking this, and you're recognizing the pattern, but the secondary pattern is that black can bring the knight out and defend the bishop. Don't forget about that when you're considering this check. Always check whether, no pun intended, whether this can be blocked. Now, some of you see the... Oh my god, good thing it doesn't happen tomorrow. Let's hope it doesn't happen tomorrow. Some of you see bishop takes g7, which is fine, but this is an example of tunnel vision. You see that the rook is hanging, you think I'm winning an exchange. But if you calculate this a little bit further, black can take the bishop. This is already not that impressive. An exchange is good, but it's not game-winning. And if you calculate further, you'll see the pin. You'll notice a move like c3, and this leads to complete chaos. If the knight moves, then black will go c2 and win the queen. So instead, we look for intermediate moves. We say, well, can we move this bishop? We can. But black has king f8. Oh man, black does have king f8 here, so still white can castle and the king is very weak. But my idea was to first move the bishop away to safety and then take on g7. All right. So why is king f1 okay? King f1 is okay because the king is not in any immediate danger, and you can always sort of castle by hand. And the point here is that the knight on d2 clutters up the center. This queen doesn't have the same control over the d file. It doesn't quite have the same mobility. This is a pin. It's not a dangerous one, but a pin is a pin. That's something you have to pay attention to. So paradoxically, king f1 is less burdensome on white's pieces. And the way you should think about this is, you know, knight bd2 is the fuel-efficient move. Knight bd2 is the sort of the Toyota Prius kind of move. King f1 is the let me climb into my Ferrari kind of move. And let's forget about these other considerations and let's go directly for the immediate initiative. And we'll worry about our king safety later. Well, bishop c3 is not good because this bishop is our strongest piece. This is the piece which is doing most of the attacking, as you can see. So this would allow him to bail out our bishop for his bishop, which is not a particularly strong piece. Knight b to d2. f6 is a big mistake. Nothing wrong with the Toyota Prius. In fact, Toyota is a phenomenal car brand. Okay. So knight f6 would, I think, have been the lesser evil for him. But in this position, what can white do? What can white do here? Thank you, Tetsuo's Grid. e5 comes to mind, but there is a better move here. Let's make the other observations. The bishop is undefended. How can we exploit this? Well, first thing you might see is queen b3. That looks like a fork, right? We're attacking f7, attacking the bishop. But black can take the knight with check, and then black has the time to castle. You have a two-move sequence. What do I always say? You need to check what happens if you switch the move order. Start with bishop f7 check, then go queen b3, pick off the bishop, and black's king is going to be in some trouble. Still, I think this is more double-edged. Thank you, Archo. That's awesome. f6 is a big mistake because it creates a permanent weakness. And why is this a permanent weakness? Because pawns don't go backward. He's forever going to have to reckon with this diagonal being very weak. What if knight d5? If knight d5, then we'll just take the knight. And now we have the possibility of a discovered attack or discovered check against the king here. Okay. So on we go. f6, queen b3. Now this stage of the game was very simple. Knight takes, we castle, we go e5. Again, if he takes, we take back. He can't take the bishop because of the pin. This is very simple. So let's get straight to the tactics. Bishop a3. Now we want this knight to get to d6. How can we do that? We need to go through c4. Let's move the bishop out of the way. This is very logical chess. Knight d6. If he takes the pawn on e5, we take on c5. And we support the knight. And he played b6, we go rook d1, x-raying the king, x-raying the king. And now we get into the complicated tactics, right? Okay, so the knight b5 check forces the king into one direction, which clarifies how we are going to proceed. If the king goes back to d8, that's why we put a rook on d1. We can take the knight on c6. Everybody should be able to follow this. Bishop can't be captured. We're up a piece, and we're still attacking, right? We'll race for the prize. It's just because it's such a central outpost, and the knight just clamps down, sits on black's position. All right. That is not 30 moves ahead. That's a 2-move sequence. And it's particularly facilitated by the fact that I explained why we put the rook on d1 in the first place. So you should be primed to consider that. Okay, sorry. We played rook c1 first. All right, dude. So knight b5 check. He's got to go to the b file. And in my mind, I immediately see, as you guys also should see, that the queen is x-raying the king. And that's why the move bishop takes c5 comes to mind. Because we have to get this b pawn out of the picture so that we can give a discovered check against the king. And the way to do that is to incentivize it to move. And we incentivize it by threatening bishop d6. Hope that makes sense. B takes c5. And this is the hardest moment in the game. This and the next move. I think everybody might have been surprised why I didn't move the knight away. And that's because I just didn't see a good discovered check. Okay, perhaps some of you spot knight d6 check. But black goes king c7. Guys, hold off on the drama. Hold off on the discussion. I'll be streaming tonight, and I'll comment more on it. Yeah, thanks, Lano. But right now I'm doing the speedrun, and like I always say, we try to keep this community a certain way and to keep it a reliable place where people can come for chess primarily. And I only discuss this drama stuff if I absolutely have to. And I try to limit it. Okay, so let's, again, exercise our responsibility to keep it that way. Particularly if I ask. Now, I know that some of you are coming in just in the last couple of minutes and you didn't know, so that I'm not going to ban anybody or time anybody out, but it's sort of a zero tolerance thing. Once I tell you and you're in the stream, please abide by that. All right. So king c7, and there's no follow-up. The king is safe here. So knight d4, king c7, the king is safe here. If you look carefully, you have no good squares for the knight. Now, that's not a reason to panic. Because I talked previously about kinetic versus potential energy. And kinetic versus potential energy, and I drew that graphic, that was many, many months ago. But some of you guys who've been in my stream for a while remember. Do you guys want a refresher on that, or should I just get on with life? I don't know if this is too much talking. Okay, refresher. Quick refresher. Most of you have taken physics. I'm by no means an expert. I kind of sucked at physics. Particularly, I sucked at labs and following instructions. Nothing has really changed. But the one concept that stuck with me is kinetic versus potential energy. So if we take a look at a roller coaster, and that's the most classic illustration of it. If we take a look at how a roller coaster operates, so basically, this is the King Dakar roller coaster in New Jersey. And you can see how Monka-esque that thing is. So you can see that at this moment, yeah, and they're all screaming. Now, this roller coaster doesn't actually stop. Most roller coasters go up the hill and then they stop completely, and that allows us to better illustrate this notion. But at the moment that they're at the very top of the first hill, if I'm not butchering this, the roller coaster has maximum potential energy because it's at its slowest speed, but it's about to speed up to its fastest speed, right? And then the moment that it's on the bottom of the hill, this is pretty terrifying. Right now, it's at the bottom of the first hill, and it's got the most kinetic energy, which means energy generated from movement, but it's got the least potential energy because it's at the bottom of the hill. It doesn't have that drop that's coming. Okay, so that's the usual illustration, I think. Now, well, let's go back to the speedrun. I've sort of plagiarized this for the purposes of chess. And in chess, when we evaluate the placement of a piece, we tend to think of it in terms of its kinetic energy. What is the piece doing? We see an outpost like the knight on d6, and we think, well, we look at a knight like this, and we think, well, this knight is amazing, right? It's controlling all these squares, it's doing all of this stuff. But then we look at a piece which is, let's say, blocked in by our own pawn, and we assume that that piece is bad. But a piece like that isn't always going to be bad. And that's where this notion comes in. You have to be able to look at a piece and evaluate not only its kinetic energy, what it's doing at the moment, but what it could be doing in a particular change of circumstances. And this could also be applied to a set of pieces. Now, what is an example of this? Let me give you one. When we look at this position, we have opposite side castling, right? We might see a square on d5, right? We might occupy with the knight. And then this knight will have a lot of kinetic energy. It's controlling a lot of squares, it's doing a lot of stuff. Great. Everybody should be on board with that. But let's look at this piece of garbage on b2. Total piece of garbage, right? Why does this bishop look bad? What about this bishop makes me say that? The wife and the kids are great. Yeah, it's blocked by the pawn. So what is this fool doing there? But it's got very little kinetic energy. It's not doing anything at the moment. But imagine if this pawn were gone. This would be the biggest beast in the history of pieces. I mean, particularly if we mounted a battery against b7, that bishop could win the game. So even though the bishop is bad right now, under a change of circumstances, which may or may not happen, this bishop might become very, very good. It might become the game winner. Watch what happens. Now we move our pieces around. I try to get my queen there. You know, I'm hoping he goes f5, which would be kind of dumb. He doesn't do it. Blah, blah, blah. You know, I move my king back. We maneuver our pieces. And all of a sudden, an opportunity presents itself. We move our pieces. All of a sudden, an opportunity presents itself here. It still looks like black is better because black's bishop looks much better than white's. But what did my opponent miss? There's a tactic in this position. I've shown this game before. This game is in my book also. I think it's a nice game. Rook takes f7 is great. He can't take because of rook takes c8 check. And of course, if he takes the rook on c4 with his rook, then my rook on f7 is safe. So he plays queen takes c4. And he gets two pieces for the queen. But now my queen drives into g5. And all of his pawns are dead meat. And guess which pawn in particular is dead meat? First comes e5. He tries to win some of my pawns. And finally, about 20 moves after I showed you the initial position, what move did I play in this position? Move 41. It's finally time for this bishop on g2 that was dead the entire game to come alive and win the game for white. And this bishop wins me the game. It combines with the queen. And the scenario that I laid out is exactly what happens. And this bishop is behind all of it. And in fact, the bishop contributes to the checkmate because by defending b7. So I'm leaving out a lot of details here, but I think you guys get the point. So when you're looking at a piece, think not only about the squares that it's controlling currently, but what it could be doing under a change of circumstances. Now we come back to the game. And the thing to notice in this position is that this pair of pieces, the queen and the knight, are maybe not the strongest right now. There's no good discovered check. But under a slight change of circumstances, this is going to be tremendously powerful. And that basically motivates how I play in this position. So sometimes, rather than immediately cashing in, you want to bring more pieces into the fire and keep the tension in order to allow for the potential energy of your pieces to be realized or actualized. All right? Anyways, so bishop b7. And now the move knight d4. And see, that's exactly what happens. Because I'm now x-raying his queen, the threats along the b file are much stronger than they were before. So if he goes random move, I play bishop takes c6. I'm attacking his queen. If he takes, I take his queen. If he takes c5, this is just checkmate. And all of this happens because I brought this rook into the game. He went rook e8, which is a nice move, actually. Obviously, threatening checkmate. So I go h3. I make some luft for the king. So he should have probably gone knight g4. That would have been the best move, yeah. But I think I can still take on c6 here and escape via f1 and e2. All right, so rook e8, h3, king c7. And now the very simple move, bishop c6. There were some really beautiful lines that I was calculating. And I was calculating them here before knight d4. I was calculating the move bishop takes c6 immediately. And after queen takes c5, don't limit yourself just to this area of the board. Look at the entire board. What move can you spot here? Think queen. Think c7. That's a mating square. Boom. And our queen swoops into c7. It's checkmate. We're happy. Wait a minute. Not that simple. Black can play d6 and try to throw a pawn in the way. No problem, though. Right? You don't want to take with a queen. That trades queens. But we can take with a... No, we don't want to do this. We can take with a rook. And again, we have a potential discover check against the king. And what makes this quite nice is if he gives queen c1 checkmate... Wait a second. That's not checkmate. We can step back with our rook. Discover check against the king. That seems to lead to mate. I'll get to that in a second. If he tries to sidestep the discover check, we have a really cool tactic here. We've already sacrificed one rook. That's what makes this nice. Thank you, trying to learn. What move do we have in this position? We can spot the c7 square. That's still a mating square. What's stopping us from going there? Well, it's the rook. That's all we need to know. Check and checkmate. Down 2 rooks. But then I did one final check. No pun intended. And I looked at this position for just one more second. And I spotted an insane defensive resource here. Black has the move f4. This is quite unusual, actually. Covering the check, attacking white's queen, counterattacking it. The rook on d1 is still hanging, and white is out of moves. Wherever this queen goes, it has to keep the rook defended, otherwise it's going to be checkmate. So you're limited to a move like this. But then black's queen returns and takes the bishop, and the attack dies, and black is up a rook and a piece. So, pretty insane stuff. And this line, I concluded, doesn't work. So that's why I played the patient knight d4. And this is much simpler. We just win the queen, and then we win everything else. So the lesson here, yeah, so if you play queen f1, or queen f3, then he's still, that's probably a better idea, but he can take with the bishop now. He can take with the bishop and attack the queen on f3. Insane complications here, and these games just sometimes happen. They just happen, and that's part of it. Okay. So, any questions about this line? Can't you just take his queen? Well, if I take his queen, then he takes my queen. And you might say, well, that's good, right? We win the pawn. But remember, you've sacked a rook. We've already sacrificed a rook, so we're just down a rook in the endgame. Always keep in mind the material count with which you start, because that allows you to determine whether a line like this is good or not. Can we then checkmate sacking the queen on d8? Oh, like this? I thought about that, but it's not mate. He can cover the check with a bishop, sadly. Sag, but true. And so then we play the move knight d4, no problem, and this is crushing. This is too many threats here. What if queen f3, bishop takes c6 with FPJ? What if queen f3... Sorry, one sec. I keep skipping the moment. Queen f3, bishop c6, queen d3. You want to go here? Well, where can I put this queen to prevent that? I can put it on c5. I don't think you have a follow-up. And I have the b7 square for my king. Okay, guys. I think that's enough for this game. And the end was very simple. Bishop takes, we take the queen, we check the knight, and we win everything else.